I never thought I'd see a sitting FBI director look genuinely afraid in public. Not nervous, not uncomfortable, not annoyed, afraid, the kind of fear that leaks through body language before a single word is spoken, the kind you can't fake and can't hide. But it happened in real time, in front of cameras, microphones, and a room full of power. The hearing room was packed, cameras from every major network, press benches overflowing, House Judiciary members in their seats. A normal oversight session on paper, routine, predictable, budget questions, cybersecurity updates, immigration policy, political theater, the usual script everyone follows, the kind of hearing nobody expects to make history. And then everything changed. It didn't start with shouting, it didn't start with chaos, it didn't start with drama. It started quietly with a folder, a thin blue folder. No theatrics, no props, no grandstanding, just a single folder placed on the desk like a warning that hadn't spoken yet. For the first hour, everything moved as expected. Soft questions, polished answers, rehearsed statements, bureaucratic language, safe responses that say nothing while sounding responsible. The FBI director stayed calm, composed, controlled, the image of authority and confidence. Then the tone shifted, not loudly, not suddenly, precisely. The blue folder opened, and the air in the room changed. The question came calmly, slowly, deliberately, not aggressive, not emotional, not dramatic, just direct and lethal. How many names did you personally remove from the Epstein files? Not your staff, not your department, not your legal teams, you. The silence was immediate and total. Not the kind of silence where people are listening, the kind where people understand something bad just happened, the kind where cameras stop moving, the kind where no one coughs, the kind where you can hear the building's ventilation system. The FBI director reached for his water, and his hand shook, not slightly, not subtly, visibly. The glass rattled against the table. That's when everyone knew this wasn't theater, this wasn't politics, this wasn't posturing, this was exposure. He tried to respond with procedure, with structure, with bureaucratic insulation, with language designed to protect institutions instead of tell truth. He spoke about classification teams, review processes, protocols, committees, procedures, chains of authority. But the answer didn't land because it wasn't the question. The question wasn't about process. The question was about responsibility. The folder opened again. One document came out, an internal memo, official seal, agency letterhead, classification stamps, authorization codes, signatures, the kind of paper that doesn't lie, the kind of paper that ends careers. It stated plainly that dozens of Epstein-related witness testimonies had been personally flagged for permanent classification override, not by committees, not by departments, not by legal teams, but by the director himself. Not delayed, not reviewed, not temporarily sealed, buried permanently, because they named powerful people. And the room erupted, not loudly, but emotionally. Whispers, gasps, phones lighting up, journalists typing, staffers moving, members looking at each other with visible panic. The director's face changed in real time, shock, calculation, fear. He tried to explain, tried to deflect, tried to reposition it as policy, as procedure, as governance, but the documents kept coming, one after another: memos, internal reviews, inspector findings, classification notes, authorization records, each one tightening the noose, each one removing another layer of protection, each one stripping away another excuse. The Inspector General's review stated clearly, multiple testimonies were permanently classified with no legitimate national security justification, no intelligence risk, no operational risk, no threat to investigation, no safety risk. Only one justification appeared repeatedly in internal notes: political complications. Not national security, not public safety, political complications, meaning too powerful to expose, too connected to touch, too dangerous to name. Witness after witness was listed: survivors, staff members, employees, victims, teenagers, young women, people who gave names, dates, descriptions, locations, identities, and every single one of them was buried, not to protect the country, to protect reputations. Then one testimony was read out loud: a trafficking survivor, 19 years old when abused. She gave names, 6 men, identifiable, verifiable, traceable, men with power, men with money, men with influence, men with protection. Her testimony was permanently classified, not delayed, not reviewed, not reconsidered, erased. 15 years later, she still hasn't seen justice. And the question came again, slower this time, not angry, not loud, not dramatic, just heavy. Why did you protect them instead of her? No answer, no defense, no language, no procedure, no protocol, no policy, no explanation, only silence. The kind of silence that feels like confession, the kind of silence that ends careers, the kind of silence that destroys credibility, the kind of silence that history remembers. Hands shaking, face pale, eyes avoiding the cameras, power evaporating in real time. The final motion was simple: subpoena all files, all testimonies, all communications, all classification records, all override authorizations, all internal memos, all contacts with named individuals, every document, every name, every decision, every cover, everything. The hearing collapsed into procedural chaos after that. Motions, objections, interruptions, parliamentary noise, but none of it mattered anymore because the damage was already done. The clip spread within minutes, not hours, minutes, across platforms, across countries, across political lines. People weren't debating politics. They were asking one question: who is being protected and who is being sacrificed? A blue folder exposed 47 buried testimonies, 47 silenced voices, 47 survivors, 47 stories hidden not for safety, but for power. And one man sat in silence, unable to explain why. No shouting, no spectacle, no performance, just documents, truth, names, and fear. Sometimes accountability doesn't come through investigation. Sometimes it doesn't come through commissions. Sometimes it doesn't come through years of hearing. Sometimes it comes through one question, one folder, one moment, one silence, and one truth that can't be buried anymore. Power was protected, victims were ignored, justice was delayed, truth was classified, and silence did the talking. What happened next didn't feel like politics anymore. It felt like something breaking. Institutions don't collapse loudly, they fracture quietly, slowly, invisibly. In that room, power didn't shatter, it leaked. Confidence drained out of posture, authority drained out of voice, control drained out of presence. The man who walked into that hearing as the most powerful law enforcement official in the country walked out looking small, exposed, and hollowed out. Behind the scenes, panic moved faster than policy. Staffers flooded hallways. Phones rang without stopping. Offices that normally speak in calm, measured tones were suddenly operating in crisis mode. Lawyers weren't debating strategy anymore. They were discussing survival. Public relations teams weren't shaping narratives. They were trying to stop hemorrhaging. Damage control replaced governance. Spin replaced truth. Silence replaced answers. Inside the building, conversations shifted tone. No one was asking if it was bad. Everyone was asking how bad it was. Not whether it would spread, but how far. Not whether it would stick, but who it would take down with it. Because this wasn't just one decision. It wasn't just one file. It wasn't just one classification. It was a pattern, a system, a structure of protection that had existed quietly for years, now exposed in daylight. The survivors' names began to circulate, not publicly at first, internally, in legal circles, in advocacy spaces, in investigative rooms. Their stories, once buried in sealed files and redacted documents, started surfacing again. Voices that had been silenced by classification codes and bureaucratic language were being spoken aloud for the first time in years. Real people, real pain, real lives that had been reduced to file numbers and stamped pages. Outside the building, the reaction wasn't partisan. It wasn't ideological. It was human. People weren't arguing about politics. They were asking why victims were ignored, why testimony was buried, why truth was treated like a threat, why power was protected more fiercely than innocence, why justice only seemed to move when cameras were watching. Survivors across the country saw themselves in those testimonies, not in the names, in the silence, in the waiting, in the years of being ignored, in the feeling of knowing the truth and being told it didn't matter enough. For many of them, that hearing wasn't about one man. It was about a system that had failed them over and over again. A system that talks about justice while practicing protection. A system that speaks about law while bending it for influence. The most disturbing part wasn't the documents. It wasn't the memos. It wasn't the classifications. It wasn't even the buried testimonies. It was the logic behind it all. The idea that truth can be managed, that justice can be delayed strategically, that exposure can be calculated, that victims can be weighed against reputations, that suffering can be measured against political risk. That's not corruption in the dramatic sense. It's colder than that. It's administrative, it's procedural, it's sanitized, it's done in offices, not alleyways, with stamps, not weapons, with signatures, not threats, with memos, not violence, but the damage is the same, sometimes worse, because it looks clean. What people saw in that room wasn't just a man losing control of a narrative, they saw a system losing control of secrecy. The language of authority stopped working. The shields of bureaucracy failed. The layers of insulation collapsed. Procedure couldn't protect power anymore. Structure couldn't hide truth anymore. And silence became louder than any speech. Every institution depends on belief. Belief in legitimacy, belief in integrity, belief in purpose. When that belief cracks, the institution doesn't fall immediately, but it starts leaking trust. And once trust leaks, it never comes back the same way. The most powerful moment wasn't the accusations, it wasn't the documents, it wasn't the memos, it wasn't even the questions, it was the absence of an answer. Because an unanswered question is louder than any confession. Silence becomes evidence, fear becomes testimony, stillness becomes truth. In that silence, people saw something they weren't supposed to see: vulnerability in power, weakness in authority, uncertainty in control. The illusion cracked. And once people see behind the curtain, they never forget it. The story didn't end in that room. It only started there. Investigations began quietly. Subpoenas moved through channels. Advocacy groups mobilized. Legal teams prepared filings. Journalists reopened old files. Survivors came forward again. Whistleblowers began contacting reporters. The sealed doors started opening, slowly, carefully, but visibly. Because once one file comes out, others follow. Once one name appears, others surface. Once one truth is spoken, others demand space. Secrecy doesn't collapse all at once. It erodes, and erosion is unstoppable once it begins. The deeper reality is this: systems don't protect people. They protect stability. And stability often means power, and power often means silence. And silence always has a cost. That cost is paid by people without influence, without money, without access, without protection. The hearing didn't create that reality. It revealed it. It didn't invent corruption. It exposed structure. It didn't start injustice. It showed how it survives. And the most dangerous idea for any system is not rebellion. It's visibility. Because once people see how something works, they stop believing how it's described. The room returned to normal eventually. The cameras turned off. The chairs emptied. The microphones went silent. The lights dimmed. But nothing was normal anymore, because something irreversible had happened. A line had been crossed. A truth had been spoken. A silence had been recorded. A system had been seen. And once that happens, control becomes impossible to fully restore. Power depends on narrative. Narrative depends on trust. Trust depends on truth. And truth had escaped the room, not dramatically, not loudly, not violently, but permanently.